It's Toronto's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network.
Today, we are with Jeremy Lundy, whose company, Techorrect, offers test automation and development acceleration consulting for software development projects. Jeremy, welcome to Canada's podcast. You know, the first question I always like to ask people is, how did you get started? Tell me a little bit about how you became an entrepreneur, your journey to get from where you were to where you are now. It's always interesting. Everyone gets there different ways.
Yep. So basically what I was working for a large telecom company, and I had gone out, I was managing a development unit, and I'd gone out to ask the market for someone to come in and help with basically test automation and sort of what are now called DevOps practices, to come in and set up my test automation framework, train my staff to be able to maintain and extend that framework, and then leave, because I did not want to have long-lived consultants in my organization. And I was told that that didn't exist, and even if it did exist, I couldn't afford it. So, I noted that down at the time, and I said, well, someone should definitely do that. When it basically came time to leave that company, my business partner was also in between jobs, and we sort of sat down and we talked about a couple of ideas that we had, and we were both in positions financially where starting our own company wouldn't be the most insane thing in the world.
That's important. Yeah.
That's proven to maybe not be true. It's still pretty insane. But we were both in a position where it was sort of if we were going to try it at any point, now seemed to be the correct point.
Yeah.
And so we decided to start the company and offer the services that I was looking for in my prior position. Yeah.
Okay. So you explained a little bit about what your company does, but what does it do exactly, in terms of, who do you sell to?
Sure.
Or should I say, who buys from you?
So the main people that we like to talk to are companies that either build software for sale or software for internal use, software for operations, and are really at a point where they're starting to scale their development team. So a lot of times, if you're, say, a startup company or you're a very small team, you're able to run at speed, and you're able to, because everyone is so involved, you can sort of get by without having a lot of bulky frameworks around, because you can just sort of talk to people. And if you have a team of 3 people, there's no reason to communicate via, say, a ticketing system or a backlog management system or something like that. You can just talk person to person. When you start to scale a team like that, though, when you start to onboard new developers, if you don't have the appropriate framework in place, you can basically say, okay, well, here are 3 new developers. Here are 3 existing developers. We now need to train these 3 developers. So if we take one person and have them do the training, you're sacrificing 30% of your development capacity to just bring the new people online. So what we do is we help companies, help software development teams focus on building infrastructure as code, test automation, development and test environment and production environment parity, so that people don't have to go and say, well, here's how you set up your development environment, and here's how you commit code and get it into production. We help companies set it up so that all of that is written down and automated, so that they don't have to spend as much time training people on the vagaries of how the development process works.
Okay. Cool. You're from Toronto, we were talking earlier, and you've been to other places, but you're back in Toronto. What are the benefits of doing business in Toronto? And, the other side of it is, what are the challenges of doing business in Toronto?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I love Toronto. I can't imagine being anywhere else at this particular time. I think that one of the great things about Toronto right now is the tech community is fairly active. There's a lot of sort of meetups and conferences going on all the time, really good opportunities to network. I think that, and this is sort of just something that I picked up from going to those types of events.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I think there's a certain lack of free moving capital, shall we say, on the startup side. So I think I've talked to a lot of people that are in the startup space, and they have a really hard time finding venture capitalists, angel investors who are willing to sort of take the plunge with them, because it's just such a smaller market compared to Silicon Valley. So in a lot of companies that sort of are able to capture a bit of imagination, they end up going down to Silicon Valley, finding capital down there, and then coming back and building their product in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to fix that because I do not have billions of dollars to invest in startups, which is, so I'm part of the problem.
It's a kind of interesting thing, I'm a little older than you, but it's been going on for 30 years, and the sad thing from my perspective is it hasn't really changed.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want capital, sometimes it's best to leave town and go to San Francisco or Boston or London, even, and not London, Ontario, London, England, and find it there. So no disrespect to London, Ontario, just make sure. So the sort of benefits. I mean, but Toronto's I'm from Toronto. Toronto's an awesome place. Why would you recommend it to other entrepreneurs who are looking to start a business?
Yeah, so I think that from a talent perspective, there is a lot of talent constantly coming into the city. Even from someone looking for a job perspective, it's also, there's a lot of businesses moving into Toronto and snapping up talent. Mm-hmm. I think that one thing that I frequently run into is you go to a networking event. Someone's like, I just landed in Toronto from, place X last week. Do you know of anyone hiring? And I'm like, well, send me a resume. I'll do a quick review of it. I'll send it around to 5 people. Mm-hmm. And the weird thing is that the majority of the time, by the time I follow up and say, hey, have you sent me that resume yet? They're like, oh no, I already found a job. Don't worry.
It's a bit like that, yeah.
Market, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So really talent if you can get it. Okay. So but there is a lot of it though. So the interesting thing is our best ideas often come when we least expect them. So mm-hmm. How do you disconnect, recharge, get inspired, in and around Toronto? How what's your process?
So I like from a disconnect and relax type of thing. I really enjoy the amount of sort of sports that are going on in the city. Obviously, the Raptors just won the championship, which was fantastic, and I followed that pretty closely. Mm-hmm. Previously, I am a fairly large Jays fan, but I think this might be a season or two that will be lost in history. And I really enjoy going to the Toronto Wolfpack game, the rugby league that started up in Lamport Stadium down in Liberty Village.
Yeah. I'm a rugby union guy, so
apologies. I enjoy the working man's game. I played rugby union in high school.
Yeah. Okay.
And I enjoy both, but the fact that there's this pro team that flies across the Atlantic and bashes the hell out of all comers is it's so much fun to watch.
Okay. What are you most excited about in your business these days?
So the biggest thing that we're focusing on right now is our marketing and sales process, and and we're working with another small company to sort of build that out. It is interesting to see, how certain actions like a LinkedIn post or a blog post, we're about to find out what a video does as far as driving traffic to the website, and getting, like, measuring how actions result in contact coming inbound. I think that as a very technical person, the hubris perhaps that I had when I started the company and said, well, anyone can do sales and marketing, that's easy. The hard part is the technical bit. I was so completely wrong about that, that I think that's the most interesting thing that I'm learning about most rapidly.
Yeah, well, having grown up in technology marketing, it's an interesting thing. Demand is always interesting. Demand generation.
Exactly.
What's been the greatest challenge so far that you've faced in your business, and maybe in your industry, which is sort of the software side of things, really?
Sure. So I think that one of the biggest challenges in software right now is change averseness, if that's a word. I think that a lot, especially with larger organizations, the ability to experiment and fail is really discouraged and has a really poor perception. Like I talk to people all the time about the situation that they're in, and maybe that situation is they're not getting changes done as fast as they think. They're also not willing to change the way in which they do things. They're worried that if they change to something that is that perhaps reduces the speed that they already have, they're not willing to go through that hockey stick transformation where you do a bit of investment to get a larger return on the other end. So yeah, I think that, like, discussing that and really bringing measurements into how fast the process is going, and then when you change that process, how fast are you going after that, especially when you're maybe making changes that make the before and after hard to compare. Like, sort of you're switching from apples to oranges. Well, okay, you have more oranges, but what does that even mean?
Based on where you are now, what you know now, what do you wish you'd known when you started your business in Toronto?
Marketing is just as, if not more important than actually having a working service. We've spent a lot of time focusing on, okay, what is our engagement process going to be? And so we worked that out, and we came up with and we've done it a few times, and we think that and we've seen the success of it. But without being able to communicate that and actually get that in front of the right people, it's sort of useless. I mean, the way that we've gotten our contracts to this point has been, largely, person-to-person communication, networking events, that type of thing, and that's great. But when you try and get outside of that, communicating in written and online and social media forms is so much more difficult than I could have possibly understood. If I could go back and tell myself before, I'd be like, figure that out before you start.
Product development and marketing are the only true investments in a business. That's basically, that's my belief. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I think actually, like, the best piece of advice I've received was probably from my uncle, because when we were starting, we basically, we started going to all these startup events, and everyone was talking about investment and capital and equity and debt-based financing and that type of thing. And so we were writing up our business plan, and I sent it over to my uncle for review, both my uncles for review, and they both pretty much said like, well, okay, if you think you can make money, don't take money, just go and make the money, and then you'll be fine. Like, don't focus on raising money and giving away pieces of your business if you can just instead go and perform the business, basically. So I think that saved us a lot of time, because we didn't sort of go the traditional startup route and go to market and try and get capital and all that stuff.
Good. That's good for people to hear.
Yeah.
Actually, we're now going to do some what we term rapid fire questions. So
Sure.
I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Just answer them as quickly as possible. Don't think too much.
Okay.
And let's sort of see where we end up.
Sure.
So first one is, if you weren't doing what you do for work now, what would you be doing instead?
Ideally, something in sports. I mean, the joke that not the joke, I'm dead serious. The thing that I tell my wife is that when I retire, I will be splitting my time between being an usher at a baseball stadium and being a marshal on a golf course.
Cool.
So I've got the retirement plan figured out.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And my retirement plan is just 2 jobs.
Okay. What books are you currently reading, and what books would you recommend to our audience?
I am not the biggest reader, so
That's okay.
I think I've been reading. It's a novel. It's called "And Now I Become Invincible," which is sort of it's a superhero type novel, but from the perspective of the villain. So it's interesting to read.
I find there's you either get avid readers or passive readers, like, if you like.
Yeah.
And some people love to read about what they do, and other people love to read about the opposite.
Exactly.
It's kind of interesting how you do that. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, man, what would it be, and why would it be that one?
I would pick the word. I know you said answer as quickly as possible. I would pick the word big. How about that? I find myself big in pretty much every regard. So I find that people tell me I have a big personality. I'm pretty big into. I go big into the pursuits that I pursue, and I'd say that.
Okay, that's good. Hopefully things like big thinker as well. So that's
Exactly.
cool. Yeah, that's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
What's keeping you up at night?
I mean, occasionally when I turn on Twitter and I see what's going on in the world, that sometimes concerns me, but I'll steer clear of anything more specific than that. People can read into that whatever they may, and they can view it from themselves. I mean, that obviously is a bit of a concern. Obviously, the long-term future of the business is something that I think about quite frequently. And stuff that's going on with friends and family that pretty much, I think the things that keep up most people at night is probably what keeps me up.
Yeah. What's your favorite place in the world, and why is it your favorite place?
Yeah. Dunedin, Florida.
That's because of baseball. Yeah.
It is my favorite place to go, and I started going out like after I got my first job. The first actual working man's vacation that I took was down to spring training baseball, and I was the happiest person that has ever existed. And every time I've been down since.
So if you could choose your most favorite place to go, and you could get there free, Would it be Dunedin or would it be somewhere
Absolutely.
else?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay.
I'm a simple.
That's good. Yeah. So what I find with entrepreneurs is they tend to have routines. So what are the 3 non-negotiables that have to happen? And I don't know whether yours is a morning routine or an evening routine.
The things that have to happen in a day. I'd say the mid-afternoon coffee is a big one for me, and also for my business partner, where we have a local coffee shop we like to go to, and and we sort of know everybody there, and it's good to go in and sort of take that 15 minutes, disconnect, and then refresh. Basically, I think that's
okay. All right, good. So this is what we ask everybody. I don't know if you've been listening to the podcast. Yeah. There's the beautiful tropical island in the middle of the ocean. It's got one phone booth and it's got no internet. We drop you off there. There's no technology at all, so you don't even have a computer. You can use the phone booth at any time on the island to call the boat to come pick you up. How long would you last before making the phone call, and what would you do?
Do they play baseball on the island?
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, I think I could probably take, if it's a sunny tropical island, I could probably make that work for probably a couple months, but then eventually I'd probably get pretty bored, and then I would view it as a vacation and then come back refreshed.
Okay,
I think.
Okay. That's interesting. So that's coming to the end of the session, but I really this is sort of about entrepreneurs communicating with others.
Sure.
How can our listeners get a hold of you? And do you want to add anything before you leave us today?
So I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. Both are just Jeremy Lundy. From there, you can find the website, like my company and the website. If you go to DevOpsDesignBuild.com, that's the easiest way to get to our company. We're launching our YouTube video actually after I get off this call with you. So that has hopefully people find it a succinct description of what we do. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, Jeremy, thanks for coming on to Canada's podcast. It's really been interesting. And, hope things go well with the YouTube launch.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.